In November 1177, the entire Middle East was about to burn. Saladin, the legendary Sultan of Islam, had assembled a massive army of 30,000 hardened warriors. He was marching toward Jerusalem, completely convinced that no force on earth could stop him. And on paper, he was right. Standing in his way was a teenage boy, 16-year-old King Baldwin IV, a boy who was dying of leprosy. His body was rotting away, his skin covered in bandages, his arms losing all feeling. To make matters worse, Baldwin had managed to gather only 500 Templar knights and a few thousand militia. Saladin outnumbered him 60-1. The Sultan was so confident of victory that he didn't even bother forming a proper battle line. He allowed his massive host to spread out across the desert, plundering villages along the way. He assumed the crippled young king would simply hide behind the thick walls of Jerusalem. He was dead wrong. Baldwin knew that if Saladin reached Jerusalem, the kingdom would fall. So despite his excruciating agony, the 16-year-old king strapped himself to his horse. Because his hands were paralyzed by leprosy, his attendants had to tie his reins to his wrists so he wouldn't fall off. On November 25th, near a desolate place called Montgisard, Saladin's scattered forces were suddenly blindsided. Through the shimmering heat haze of the desert, 500 heavy Templar cavalry appeared out of nowhere. At the head of this tiny army stood Baldwin. The young king dismounted, fell to his knees on the burning sand, and prayed before the true cross, weeping for his kingdom. Then he rose, climbed back into his saddle, and pointed his sword toward the enemy. What happened next was pure carnage. The heavy Knights Templar launched a brutal, devastating cavalry charge directly into Saladin's unprepared center. The thunder of thousands of hooves shook the ground. Steel smashed into flesh. Saladin's soldiers were caught completely off guard. They couldn't form rank, they couldn't maneuver, and they couldn't stop the furious momentum of the Crusader charge. The 500 knights fought not like men, but like demons possessed, carving a blood-soaked path through tens of thousands of panicking troops. Saladin's elite bodyguard fought heroically to protect their master, but they were cut down one by one. The Sultan himself barely escaped with his life, fleeing into the desert on a fast racing camel, leaving behind his army, his personal guard, and his own nephew, who was slain in the chaos. Out of 30,000 men, barely 10% of Saladin's army survived the retreat back to Egypt. It was one of the most miraculous military victories in human history. A dying 16-year-old boy, bound to his saddle and consumed by leprosy, had shattered the most powerful conqueror of the medieval world.